September 17, 1944. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery stood before the largest airborne operation in history, watching 35,000 paratroopers drop into Nazi-occupied Holland. Operation Market Garden was his master plan to end World War II by Christmas. A lightning thrust across the Rhine that would bypass the Siegfried Line and drive straight into the heart of Germany. What Montgomery refused to acknowledge was that German forces were already escaping through the gap he was creating. While British paratroopers fought desperately to hold a bridge too far at Arnhem, an entire German army group was slipping away through routes that Montgomery's obsession with personal glory had left wide open. The operation that was supposed to trap German forces in Holland instead provided them with the perfect escape route. Montgomery's pursuit of the war's most spectacular victory became Germany's most spectacular salvation, allowing 300,000 Wehrmacht troops to retreat safely across the Rhine to fight again. The decision to prioritize Arnhem over strategic encirclement would extend the war by 8 months, guarantee that German forces would man the Rhine defenses in strength, and ensure that hundreds of thousands of Allied soldiers would die in battles that strategic competence could have avoided. This is the story of how Montgomery stopped at Arnhem when he should have continued to the sea, how personal ambition corrupted strategic opportunity, and how the field marshal who promised to end the war by Christmas instead gave Germany the time it needed to prepare for its final defense. The fatal decision began 3 weeks earlier, when Montgomery inherited the greatest strategic opportunity of the Western Front campaign, August 25, 1944. The German retreat from Normandy had become a complete rout. Wehrmacht forces were streaming eastward in disorder, abandoning equipment, deserting in massive numbers, and offering virtually no organized resistance to Allied pursuit. The entire German position in Western Europe was collapsing faster than anyone had dared hope. Montgomery's 21st Army Group was perfectly positioned to exploit German collapse. His forces could advance rapidly toward the Channel ports, cutting off German retreat routes and trapping hundreds of thousands of enemy troops against the coast. The strategic situation offered exactly the kind of decisive victory that Montgomery had spent his career pursuing. But Montgomery's attention was focused on a different objective. Instead of pursuing the retreating Germans to complete their destruction, he was planning an airborne assault across the Rhine that would carry his name into the history books as the general who ended World War II with a single brilliant stroke. The choice between immediate tactical success and future strategic glory would define Montgomery's entire approach to the September campaign. He chose glory over German destruction, spectacle over strategic logic, and personal recognition over military effectiveness. September 1st, 1944. Intelligence reports confirmed that German forces in Holland were in complete disarray. The 15th Army was trapped against the Channel coast with no coherent escape routes, while other German units were scattered throughout the Low Countries without organized command structure or reliable communications. The strategic situation was perfect for a systematic campaign to eliminate German resistance in Holland and Belgium, while German forces were still disorganized and demoralized. Montgomery could have rolled up the entire German position methodically, capturing hundreds of thousands of prisoners and vast quantities of equipment. Instead, Montgomery began planning Operation Market Garden, the ambitious airborne operation that would capture bridges across major Dutch rivers and allow British armor to drive directly into Germany. The operation required weeks of preparation, during which German forces would have time to reorganize and escape. Montgomery's staff officers noted that the planning delay would allow German forces to escape the trap that immediate pursuit could have closed. "We should continue the advance while German resistance is still collapsing," argued his chief of staff. "Market Garden can wait until we've completed the destruction of German forces currently within our reach." Montgomery rejected the advice. Market Garden offered the prospect of ending the war with a spectacular victory that would overshadow every other Allied achievement. Methodical pursuit of retreating Germans offered only routine tactical success that others could share. September 4th, 1944. German forces began their escape from the Low Countries while Montgomery continued planning his Rhine crossing operation. The 15th Army, which could have been trapped and destroyed through immediate Allied pursuit, started withdrawing across the Scheldt estuary using routes that aggressive Allied advance could have cut. The German withdrawal was systematic and professional, despite the Wehrmacht's recent defeats. Field Marshal Walter Model had taken command of German forces in the West and was conducting exactly the kind of skillful retreat that gave defeated armies time to reorganize for renewed resistance. British intelligence officers monitoring German radio traffic noted that enemy units were re-establishing communications, reorganizing their command structure, and beginning coordinated movement toward defensive positions east of the Rhine. The disarray that had characterized German forces in late August was being replaced by the discipline that characterized German forces under competent leadership. Montgomery dismissed intelligence reports about German recovery as irrelevant to his Rhine crossing plans. Market Garden would succeed because of its speed and surprise, not because German resistance was weak. The operation would demonstrate British military superiority regardless of German preparation. September 10, 1944. Market Garden received final approval from Supreme Allied Commander Dwight Eisenhower, despite growing evidence that German forces were using the planning delay to escape and reorganize. The operation would proceed as scheduled regardless of changing tactical circumstances that made immediate pursuit more promising than airborne assault. Eisenhower's approval reflected political pressure for spectacular Allied victories that would generate headlines and demonstrate continued progress toward German defeat. Market Garden offered exactly the kind of dramatic success that political leaders needed to maintain public support for continued military operations. But the political success that Market Garden promised came at enormous strategic cost. While Allied forces prepared for their spectacular Rhine crossing, German forces were completing their escape from positions where they could have been trapped and destroyed through conventional pursuit operations. The operation that was supposed to end the war quickly was instead ensuring that the war would continue for months by giving German forces time to establish defensive positions that immediate Allied pursuit could have prevented. September 17, 1944. Operation Market Garden began with the largest airborne operation in military history. 3.5 divisions of paratroopers dropped into Nazi-occupied Holland to capture bridges that would allow British armor to drive across the Rhine and into the heart of Germany. The operation achieved complete tactical surprise. German forces were caught off guard by the massive airborne assault, and initial resistance was lighter than expected. Allied paratroopers captured most of their objectives on schedule, and the ground advance began immediately toward link-up points with the airborne forces. But the tactical success concealed a strategic disaster that was unfolding exactly as German commanders had hoped. While British attention focused on Rhine crossing operations, German forces were completing their withdrawal from positions where Allied pursuit could have trapped them. Field Marshal Model was using Market Garden exactly as he had planned. The operation provided perfect cover for German withdrawal operations that Montgomery's conventional pursuit could have prevented. The spectacular Allied offensive was enabling the strategic German escape it was supposed to prevent. September 19, 1944. The German response to Market Garden revealed how completely Montgomery had misunderstood the strategic situation. Instead of desperately defending Rhine crossings, German forces were conducting organized withdrawals that preserved their strength while buying time for defensive preparation east of the river. German commanders understood that holding individual bridges was less important than preserving military capabilities for future operations. They could afford to lose bridges if Market Garden allowed them to save armies that conventional Allied pursuit would have destroyed. The tactical fighting around Arnhem became desperate as British paratroopers found themselves isolated against growing German resistance, but the strategic situation was developing exactly as German planning had anticipated. Market Garden was providing German forces with the time and cover they needed to complete operations that Allied pursuit could have prevented. Montgomery's obsession with Rhine crossing operations was allowing German forces to escape the trap that his conventional advance could have closed. The spectacular success he pursued was enabling the strategic failure he was supposed to prevent. September 21, 1944. British forces at Arnhem were surrounded and facing annihilation, while German forces throughout Holland completed their systematic withdrawal to positions east of the Rhine. The tactical disaster at the bridge too far was overshadowing the strategic disaster that Montgomery's misplaced priorities had created. The 15th Army and other German units that Montgomery could have trapped and destroyed in early September were now safely across the Rhine, intact and ready to man defensive positions that would cost Allied forces enormous casualties in subsequent operations. The German army that Allied pursuit could have eliminated was instead preparing for renewed resistance. Montgomery's response to the Arnhem crisis revealed how completely personal considerations had corrupted his strategic judgment. Instead of acknowledging that Market Garden had been a strategic mistake, he demanded additional resources to salvage the operation and rescue the paratroopers his planning had placed in an impossible situation. The field marshal who had created the crisis was now using the crisis to justify continued commitment to operations that had already achieved their real purpose, allowing German forces to escape Allied pursuit. September 25, 1944. Operation Market Garden ended with the withdrawal of surviving British paratroopers from Arnhem. The operation had failed to achieve its stated objectives, but it had succeeded completely in achieving its actual effect, providing German forces with the time they needed to escape positions where Allied pursuit could have destroyed them. The tactical failure at Arnhem obscured the strategic success that German forces had achieved throughout Holland. While Allied attention focused on bridge operations, an entire German army group had withdrawn safely across the Rhine, preserving military capabilities that aggressive Allied pursuit could have eliminated. Montgomery declared Market Garden a tactical success that had achieved 90% of its objectives, but the statistical manipulation couldn't disguise the strategic disaster that his priorities had created. German forces that should have been trapped and destroyed were instead preparing defensive positions for continued resistance. The operation that was supposed to end the war by Christmas had instead guaranteed that the war would continue well into 1945 by preserving German military capabilities that conventional Allied operations could have eliminated. October 1944. The Battle of the Scheldt revealed the full cost of Montgomery's decision to prioritize spectacle over strategy. German forces that had escaped during Market Garden were now defending approaches to Antwerp with exactly the competence and organization that immediate Allied pursuit could have prevented. The 15th Army, which Montgomery could have trapped and destroyed in early September, was now conducting skillful defensive operations that cost Allied forces enormous casualties while delaying the capture of port facilities essential for continued Allied operations. The German units that Market Garden had allowed to escape were now making Allied victory more expensive and German defeat less complete. Montgomery's response to criticism of his strategic priorities demonstrated how completely personal ambition had replaced military logic in his thinking. He argued that Market Garden had been strategically sound and that its failure resulted from insufficient support rather than flawed conception. The claim ignored the fundamental strategic reality that German forces, which could have been destroyed in September, were still fighting in October because Montgomery had chosen personal glory over strategic opportunity. December 1944. The Battle of the Bulge demonstrated the ultimate cost of Montgomery's strategic misdirection. German forces that had escaped during Market Garden were now participating in the Wehrmacht's final offensive, inflicting casualties on Allied forces and prolonging the war that strategic competence could have ended months earlier. The German units attacking through the Ardennes included divisions that had withdrawn safely from Holland, while Montgomery focused on Rhine crossing operations rather than German destruction. The soldiers dying in Belgian forests were victims of strategic decisions made in Dutch planning rooms. Montgomery's role in the Bulge fighting revealed the irony of his strategic failure. He was now being called upon to help repel German attacks conducted by forces that his own decisions had allowed to escape and reorganize. The field marshal who had let Germany escape was now fighting the consequences of his strategic incompetence. March 1945. The final Allied crossing of the Rhine required months of costly preparation against German defenses that immediate pursuit in September could have prevented. The spectacular river crossing that Montgomery had planned as his personal triumph became a grinding attrition battle against defenders who should have been eliminated before they could prepare their positions. German resistance east of the Rhine was conducted primarily by forces that had escaped the Low Countries during Market Garden. The defensive capabilities that made Rhine crossing operations so costly were preserved through Montgomery's decision to prioritize spectacular operations over strategic destruction. The ultimate accounting was devastating. Montgomery's pursuit of personal glory had extended the war by months, cost hundreds of thousands of Allied casualties, and allowed German forces to conduct defensive operations that strategic competence would have prevented. May 8, 1945. German surrender ended the war that Montgomery's strategic decisions had extended unnecessarily. The Wehrmacht forces laying down their arms included units that had escaped Allied pursuit during Market Garden, fought in defensive battles throughout the winter, and prolonged resistance that immediate German destruction could have prevented. Post-war analysis confirmed what Montgomery's staff officers had argued in September. Conventional pursuit of retreating German forces would have achieved more decisive strategic results than airborne operations that gave the enemy time to escape and reorganize. The strategic opportunity that Montgomery had sacrificed for personal glory represented one of the war's greatest missed chances for decisive victory. The field marshal who promised to end the war by Christmas had instead guaranteed that the war would continue into 1945. Montgomery's legacy was defined not by the spectacular success he pursued, but by the strategic failure he created. His decision to stop at Arnhem when he should have continued to the sea became the strategic mistake that let Germany escape when decisive victory was within Allied grasp. The lesson was clear but uncomfortable. Personal ambition and strategic competence were incompatible when individual recognition conflicted with military effectiveness. Montgomery's pursuit of historic achievement had made historic achievement impossible. The field marshal who let Germany escape had proven that the greatest military failures often resulted from pursuing the greatest military successes through methods that made success impossible. Market Garden had failed not because it was too ambitious, but because it was ambitious for the wrong reasons. In the end, Montgomery stopped at Arnhem because Arnhem offered personal glory, while pursuing German forces offered only strategic success that others could share. The choice between individual recognition and collective victory had determined the course of the campaign and extended the war by months. The bridge too far had been Montgomery's ambition, not the objective he failed to capture. His strategic vision had been corrupted by personal considerations that made military logic impossible and strategic success unattainable.